We will now go to the next agenda item 9.03, 2020-2021 Summer School Planning Update. And Ms. McNamara.
Yes, this is me. John, if you could show the presentation, that would be, or pull it up, that'd be great. So in talking about our summer programming, we've begun to have quite a few discussions with our staff. I have been meeting with a team of administrators throughout the district and some counselors to get some input and feedback on our summer school programming. So when we have really identified the needs, next slide, John, we've really identified three key areas of need. The first area of concern is credit recovery. And when we look at the data, and I really thank Aida for pointing this out in a very significant way, it is not necessarily that we have more students across the board failing than ever before. The students who were at risk and failing before are in deeper holes now. So we have students who have multiple D's and F's that they have to remediate. We also have students who need elective credits. What I meet with counselors, what I'm hearing is that there are students who made choices over the last year and a half around, I'm not going to do this elective credit, or this no longer interests me. And I'm going to focus on the things I can pass and just kind of get through English, math, etc. So we do have some students that need elective credit. What we've also heard is, and I think, this is reflective of the last conversation we had, we need some flexibility in terms of attendance. There are students that need daily in-person support. And I really want to say that to everybody out there, that we have heard that loud and clear. There are students who do not need more necessarily of distance learning, or if you're going to do some kind of distance learning component, you have to have an in-person component for them so that they can kind of hook back into education. And there are students who can be successful online and don't need a ton of in-person support, maybe a little bit, maybe not much at all. The second area of concern that we have is 8th grade transition. So what we have heard, and the counselors really made me aware of this in February, that as they were doing their 8th grade meetings, they were hearing from parents and looking at transcripts with students who kind of, began to, as we have seen, kind of fall off the cliff when distance learning started. And, and their concern was high school readiness. Is my student going to be prepared to enter high school after sort of a year where I'm not sure of what they grasped and learned? So 8th grade transition is a concern. The third area of concern that we have is social emotional learning. And, we have talked about this. I don't think I need to go in depth because everybody, I think, here has a deep understanding of it. 38% of our kids our students have remained in distance learning. And in talking to our wellness, I did a planning session with our wellness coordinators. We do need kind of a transition period back to school with an emphasis on socialization, some small groups, and really kind of an orientation for both 9th and 10th grade. Because our current 9th graders, some of them have not stepped foot on campus at all and barely know kind of what their school is about and haven't, kind of adapted to school culture. So those are kind of the three main areas of concern that we want to try to address in some way this summer. So in designing our program, we've had a couple of design sessions, and this is where we've landed right now. And we are still working through some things, but we get closer and closer. We have our summer school team is meeting every Friday to kind of land, flesh out these design models a little bit more. So what we're envisioning, John, if you could go to the next slide, is three main pieces. Credit recovery, which would be offered at 2 sites. We're very cognizant of transportation that was mentioned earlier, and the need to sort of offer 2 ends of our district, 2 sites. We would do a fuel ed curriculum for credit recovery. We actually did this curriculum last summer and had a lot of success with it in that initial distance learning. We, as I mentioned earlier in my update, this would probably be largely, if not completely, taught by our own staff members. So our teachers delivering this curriculum. We would require 2 days a week in person, but if students needed more in person, just as we just talked about, there are students that, hey, I'm going to work a whole lot better if I have to go every day. And I can imagine there are parents like, I want to drive my student here every day, drop them off, and make sure that they complete the work that's in front of them. So we would have an on-campus learning center at both sites where students who need daily assistance can go. And that would be staffed with our staff members who could provide some assistance for them. And I want to say, I want to be flexible as well. I'm also aware that we have a group of students who need to make up a class or 2 classes, and maybe they're traveling for this summer. And that, first time family vacation they haven't had in a year and a half is super important to the family, and everybody needs to go. So we can do some flexible attendance with the Fuel Ed program. You can log in from anywhere in the world and get your lessons done at your own pace. So what we want to ensure in this program is that once a student demonstrates that they understand the program after those first in-person days, and they have it, and they have a need to be off campus or go, or they don't want to come, maybe they do have some social anxiety and they're not quite ready for 2 days a week back in person, we can be flexible with them as long as they're demonstrating progress, as long as they're demonstrating proficiency in the system. And the other thing about Fuel Ed, to address that, some students are in deeper holes, right? There is a belief, and I think some evidence from last summer, what we learned as we launched, last summer we launched an entirely distance learning program. It was all online, and there were a lot of big lifts last year. We were never going to be able to do an in-person orientation. We were going to literally launch this program, train students, train teachers, everything was done virtually. We don't have that lift this year, but what we didn't, so that's good. And what we did notice last year is that students who are motivated, they can accelerate and even make up more than the usual 10 credits in summer school. So I would really recommend this option for students who are in bigger holes. And if we can provide a space for them to come every day, and stay focused in the work that they do, I think they'll be able to accelerate credits even more so than last year. So that's kind of the credit recovery program. It's similar to last year, but it's got this required in-person component, but also some flexibility for our families. The second component is a summer bridge program. And this would really be high school readiness. And what we would do is it's an invite only program. So we have asked our, Dr. Nickerson has talked to our partner superintendents. We are running some data through the registrars of our partner schools. And we are going to invite our 8th grade students who really struggled this year and have a need for some high school readiness. We would look at, and we're going to look at GPA, we're going to look at, grades from this year and make some decisions about who's invited. It would be a 3-week program, and it's all in person. So we don't believe that a virtual program for these students is what is needed. A high school readiness, if we're going to be in person in the fall, we need to bring these students in person 4 days a week. Our hope is that it's taught by our staff. So we're recruiting some of our star teachers for this. And the emphasis is really on core skills, and students would receive 5 elective credits. So for example, in this 3-week program, our vision is a core group of teachers, a math teacher, an English teacher, a science teacher, and they are delivering instruction every day in their core subject area with things that pertain to high school readiness, the reading skills required for their curriculum. For example, if I'm a science teacher, how do you do a lab write-up in high school? What does that look like? What are the expectations when a 9th grade student who's in Living Earth needs to do a lab? So it's that sort of thing that we would provide. Algebra readiness. Let's do a diagnostic. Let's see where your holes are. Let me give you some summer curriculum and let's work through it so you feel a little more ready when you come in. Same for English. So that would be 8th graders only, in person 4 days a week, taught by our teachers, and providing some of that. We are hiring counselors this summer for summer school. They proved invaluable last year. And I would want a counselor to also work with these students. Hey, how does high school work? As we all know, that big transition to high school where all of a sudden everything counts for students, but they need to know, what does a transcript look like? What is your core curriculum? What are the graduation requirements? You know, where do I go to get this support? So we would want a counselor to also be assisting those students, providing things. And we have a vision for some guest speakers coming in, like our college and career advisors, introducing themselves to our students, you know, giving a talk one day. So we have some like sort of social emotional stuff, but it's all geared around high school readiness. It's academic in focus. Then our third piece would be a back to school bridge. And this name may change a little bit. We have a lot of bridges here, but that's where we landed last Friday. And it would be offered at all 4 school sites. So it would be at every school. It would be offered to all students. So it's not something where we would select. And just before just before school starts. So it would be sort of a July-August program. And its emphasis is really social emotional learning, small group activities, social activities, some grade level. I would think of it as sort of almost an extended orientation. And I think the large focus would be on our 9th and 10th grade students, those who really just don't have a sense of our school cultures and need to kind of get on campus, need to mix with each other, need to meet and greet each other. So that would be the sort of, you know, social emotional component and how we would address it. In addition, we would have some regular components that we've always had in summer school. And that's our extended school year for our students with disabilities. That will continue to be an in-person program at Del Valle Education Center. It's always held there, where we can continue to hold that. And that program really is that emphasis on skill reinforcement, social development. So there's no kind of learning loss over the summer for our students with disabilities. Then English learner support, we have traditionally done an in-person program at Las Lomas because that's where the most of our students are. And the emphasis is on academic support and language skills. That would likely be an everyday, 4 days a week in-person program because we want to really emphasize the speaking and listening component for our English learners. And then our third piece of this is geometry for advancement, which we've offered every summer as a way for our students to accelerate through geometry and get ready for Algebra 2. So that would continue. We would do it the same as last year through Fuel Ed. So our funding sources for this, we have traditionally used supplemental concentration funds. These are funds traditionally given to schools to support credit deficient students. And we're going to pay for our summer school program half out of that. The other piece will be paid out of the AB 86, that expanded, called the ELO money. That to me means Electric Light Orchestra because I grew up in the 80s, but that is not what it means in this assembly bill. It would be 50% out of this expanded learning opportunity grant. And that is for like the learning loss. And that's that funding we've all heard about coming from the state to provide extended instructional learning time, learning support, some mental health. We would use it to fund our wellness coordinators to come back early and run some of those groups. And also support our credit deficient students. So that's it in a nutshell. There's more to come. And I'm saying we're meeting every Friday. We're starting the hiring process and recruiting for our bridge teachers. And I think this will morph a little bit as the thing that is so great about our staff, when we get them together, when we put them in a room or even on a Zoom and we say, hey, this is our idea, what grows out of our expert teachers saying, hey, let's do this, or this is what I did last year. This is how I would welcome a 9th grader. So I imagine this is going to evolve a little bit, but the core of it, I think this is the structure that we have going forward.
Yeah, Ms. McNamara, I did have a question, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but is the Bridge to School program, that extended orientation, envisioned, what amount of time do you think? Or that's still just in the works?
You know, it's really interesting. That has morphed probably the most as we've had discussion about it. One of the challenges we have is sort of this balance of, we know families need a vacation and a break. And some, you know, as principal, when we got our principals in the room to talk about, hey, we're thinking of this, what do you think? And we pushed back, because originally we thought about a 2-week program right before, you know, before school started. I don't know. There was a pretty big consensus. Like, I'm not sure families will be willing to, especially if they have to go through summer school, that 9th grade bridge program, and then put your students in this. That's 5 weeks that your child may be engaged with school. Maybe some parents would be like, yes, take them. But I don't know that that's going to be flexible for all families. So I think our theory, our ideas are to offer a series of events that week before school starts. One thing the wellness coordinator said is they want to sort of get their eyes on these students that are coming back to do some diagnostic of, like, let's run a small group around anxiety and some social anxiety. And the wellness coordinator say, we envision the groups that we start during this week, or the connections that we make, forming into small groups that would last past the start of the school year. Because it's going to take a little bit of time to reintroduce some of our students back to school, especially those with some social anxiety. So they want to sort of use this as an assessment kind of program to sort of, let's do some light stuff, because that's what will really get students. If you say, hey, we're doing a mental health group, come on over. Many students will not sign up. But if we can offer some activities and then kind of throw, you know, partnered with wellness, and the wellness staff is there, and we're starting to say, hey, why don't you meet a little longer with us? We're going to talk about some of your fears about coming back, or what, you know, then we can sort of hook the kids in and get a stable group going.
Great. Thanks, Amy.
Yes. Ms. Konserski? Oh, sorry.
I had a question about the same program, but from a slightly different perspective, which was what we do regularly, ignore pandemic, to welcome freshmen or new students onto campus, whatever it is. It's slightly different at each campus, correct? Like new crew or some of the various things. And I was wondering, were we going to talk about having that for returning sophomores who perhaps were never on campus? And if we have this sort of just a question about how do those, you know, overlap, or you know, do they seamlessly go together, or
in our preliminary discussions, and I haven't met with our activities directors yet, that'll be our next step. This is kind of a replacement of that. So it would be like an extended link crew that you would do. So we would have like activities leading up to the week, and then that Thursday and Friday where traditional orientation is, it would be for both 9th and 10th grade. And to really get that orientation going. So that's our initial thought. I think the activities directors will be able to give us some guidance on, hey, this is what we can do. One of the big things the wellness coordinators really emphasized was some peer-to-peer support. It's going to feel a lot easier if we can engage our, you know, our very resilient students, our juniors, our seniors, who can help other students navigate their way back to school, and really engage that peer-to-peer support. That's one of the most powerful things you can do with adolescents, is those sort of mentoring programs. So we really have to like identify, engage, and get those students like trained. We would definitely want to do a training session with them, and run that in conjunction with wellness. I mean, wellness coordinators really feel like that's how we're going to get our eyes on kids, is by having them linked up and mentored. And then we're a part of that and observing, you know, and then reaching out to those students.
Mine's more of a comment, but I'm really, really happy to see that SEL is such a big focus in all of this, and really happy to see that the wellness staff seems to be such like an integral part of it. And you use the word culture, and I think what an appropriate word, because we're rebuilding this culture now, and we have this ability to really, again, integrate our wellness staff in our everyday life at our schools and break some of that stigma and just normalize it. And one of the biggest concerns that I've heard when talking to students is, I don't know what happens when I go to the wellness center. Like, I don't know like what that looks like. So I feel like this is such a great opportunity to, again, just kind of like break down that barrier and super, super happy with how this is looking.
Yeah, I had read some of the input that students had said about and we had a parent meeting the other night for run by Rainbow Community Center, and I had sort of tapped into the chat as the Zoom was going and saw a lot of comments from parents like, my child goes to my school's wellness center, how about yours? Oh, mine's afraid. They don't know, they don't want to be stigmatized. And what the wellness coordinator said is we have to do a lot of what they call those tier 1 activities. These are things for everybody. It's fun. You're doing mental health, but nobody knows you're doing it. You're doing some of these like instant assessments of how students are doing without really doing it. It's light. It's about self-care. There's some practical tips in there, but it's not anything super heavy. But out of that will come, I think, some assessment of who does need some group support, which would be like a tier 2 activity. And we are already seeing our students that need that intensive tier 3 one-to-one counseling support. And the nice thing is we are already hiring our mental health interns for next year. They will participate in a summer training. So I imagine some of this will also be provided by our interns, which is great. These young students who are coming out of St. Mary's that really connect with students, Rainbow Community Center, who are just going to be accessible to students and be able to provide just fun, safe activities and provide additional support when it's asked for and when we see that there's a need for it.
One other question I had is, given we have extra resources for learning loss recovery, any role that you could see for like our tier 8 students that I don't know if we have a tier 8, I think it's end at tier 3, but our tier high for kind of in-home instruction by teachers.
I can certainly look into that. That's a very good question. And yeah, you know what, I'll put that on the agenda for Friday. Steve France is in our meetings. And so we can talk about the possibility of some home hospital if we need it this summer. The other thing that we've talked about, and that was really critical last year, we realized, and we ended up like hiring one of our counselors for 2 weeks, and then we need you for the whole thing. We need you for 2 more. Our intent is to hire a couple of counselors this summer with these funds to be able to speak to and meet with some of our students who are having anxiety. The wellness coordinators have also said, hey, if you need us during the summer, let us know. We can be, last year they were on a rotation basis, kind of a call. I'm on call this week. Should you have a student that needs greater support? But I am conscious that there may be students that need some home instruction. And even some help getting maybe on Fuel Ed and accessing their curriculum. So we can certainly look into that. We will also use some of these funds for paraeducators. Our intention is to kind of staff that learning center with some of that paraeducation money. There is a allotment of one-time funds specifically for paraeducators. So we want to sort of create these learning centers where students can come in, see a friendly face, access their Fuel Ed curriculum, and get some support from somebody who is used to doing this. For students.
Amy, for someone who's listening that doesn't speak education, what is a paraeducator?
Paraeducator is usually an adult who's provided, who works at the staff. They are support staff, and they work with students with disabilities, or they work with English learners around accessing their core material. So that would be like somebody who they can be in your classroom and just helping you take notes and making sure you're staying on target and guiding you, or they could be providing more intensive support for you. And our intention with this money is to say, hey, with this funding, this is a perfect use and a call to for our classified staff who have wanted to step in and help this whole way to come in and work for us this summer in staffing these learning centers. This would be like a resource center that already exists on our campus, but it's not just for special ed students. It's for any student who just needs that support. And we saw students in distance learning who needed to come in every day to school and get in that library and just be on task. And that's our vision for these learning centers. So they would be staffed by these paraeducators who are staff members. They are trained. They get a training every year in how to kind of break down curriculum into simpler concepts and assist students without kind of doing the work for them. So they are trained, and they, I think, will be a huge asset for us this summer. as students
Excellent.
navigate through Fuel Ed, because it can be a challenging curriculum for
Thanks, Amy.
students. Mhm.
And if I can just add, and partly Dr. Severson, to address your question, the learning loss money and some of the other pockets of money to address the aftermath of the pandemic and as we transition forward, though a proposed budget will come to the board next meeting, and we'll talk about what staff is thinking, some of the uses, and we can explore additional ideas as well. And then that will need to be approved at the subsequent meeting. So a budget must be approved by June 1. So we'll bring a draft of some ideas next time, and then the following meeting will bring a budget. You know, some of that budget would be proposed for summer school. Some will be proposed for lots of other things happening during the school year.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the board on this item? Okay.